All right. Now, do people want to live here? Well, that's a good question. Um, do people want to live in New Zealand? Well, not according to the latest migration statistics, as well, some people want to live here and some people don't. I guess that's the best way to describe it. But in the year to, was it September 2025, arrivals in New Zealand were down, although still roughly 140,000 people arrived. The net gain for migration was 12,400, which is negligible. It's neither here nor there really for the year. And population growth in this country is tracking less than 1%. In fact, New Zealand's, we're not doing very good at replicating ourselves either. Mind you, wouldn't be the only country on that. Um, but and so the population statistics and the numbers of New Zealanders who have been leaving New Zealand has become a source of political debate. It often is. Whoever the government is, when people leave, always gets blamed for it. Ah, look what you've done. And the opposition always do that until they're on the other side when they go, oh, it's really just a blip, nothing to worry about here. And then you just play variations of that same political game. So you can't take an awful lot out of anything that any politician ever says on this matter. But our next guest has made a study of this, has become an acknowledged expert in this area around population, migration, and its effect upon New Zealand, its economy, our culture and society. Professor Dr. Paul's, no, Professor, I think. I'm sure he's a professor. Professor Paul Spoonley joins us now. You are a professor, aren't you, Paul? I'm
I
sorry.
am. I'm a professor emeritus, which means I've retired, but I still retain the title. Thank you.
Yeah, no. You've got down here as Dr. Paul Spoonley. I'm sure you've got a PhD, but it's just that
Yeah.
a emeritus professor means yes, you did such a good job as a professor, they let you keep the title after you retired. Is that the story?
That's true. That's exactly true. Yes.
So how many, what percent, because you don't see a lot of emeritus professors, you come across them occasionally.
Mm.
What's the
Mm.
percentage? Well, it'd be less than 10%, would it?
I don't know that. I don't know that. I'm actually a distinguished professor, which means that there aren't many of those at New Zealand universities, and it's partly in recognition of both national contribution but also international reputation. So, yeah,
So
I don't know, Michael.
you were at Massey though, or Victoria?
I was. I was. No, Messi.
At Massey. So to be a
Yes.
distinguished professor, is that something that Massey confers upon you or Universities New Zealand?
Messi.
Right,
Each of them have a similar process in which they invite people to comment upon how good you are,
right.
a mix of international and local.
Okay. So you've obviously retained, though, your interest in migration and demography since you left.
Yes, I have. I work with Koi2 and Sir Peter Gluckman, and we're looking at what might a population policy look like for New Zealand. We've got a meeting in a few minutes, actually. So,
Oh,
um,
fantastic.
yeah, so we're just trying to get a sense of the bits that make up New Zealand's population at the moment. You've mentioned a number of them, and we would really like more people to take more notice of what's happening and to have a bit of a debate about it and to, as you said, get the government involved. The governments of various political persuasions don't seem particularly interested
No.
in talking about a population policy, but, that's okay.
There is a perception in news at the moment, and this is a perception, and you'll tell me if it's right or wrong, that the people coming into our country are improving. They're coming from countries in which they're improving. They're coming from countries in which they're improving now by moving to New Zealand their economic lifestyle and opportunity. But equally, those who are leaving New Zealand are moving to countries where they have exactly the same thought. They are improving their economic opportunity and lifestyle. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have. Can I deal with each of those, Michael? I mean, in terms of the people leaving, what should be concerning to all of us is that in the last 12 months, 72,000 New Zealand citizens have left, and producing a net loss of about 46,000. They tend they tend to be the 18-year-old. They tend to be those who are in their mid-20s, and increasingly, they tend to be those who are in their early 30s. So what we're seeing is people leaving, particularly our new graduates. But we're also, when we talk about the 30-somethings leaving, that suggests they've been in the New Zealand labour market for some time. However, the New Zealand labour market's not particularly buoyant at the moment, unemployment at 5.3%. And, of course, the comparison with Australia is that you go there and you get a lot more money. And I know that Northern Territory's police are just about to begin a recruiting drive in New Zealand. So if we took that as a comparison, a new constable would get about 77,000 a year. In Northern Territories, you'd be 110,000 plus. You'd get about a $20,000 relocation allowance. You'd get about a $30,000 contribution to your housing, and your employer would be paying 12% of your salary, of equivalent to your salary, to superannuation. So definitely, there's an economic factor in all of that. When we talk about people coming to New Zealand, it tends to be that they don't do better economically than the country they've left, but they come because of lifestyle and they come for their children. And so what we see is the migrants themselves tend to, depends which country, but if you're coming out of India and China, what's surprising is that actually they very often did better economically in their home country, but they've come here for a range of reasons. So children, safety, a lifestyle, and they do want to get some money, of course, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of the three big population groups which have exploded over the last 20 years would be Indians, Chinese, who are always coming anyhow, and Filipinos, who have changed indeed. They've changed entire towns and communities in this country because of the migration numbers, and not in a bad way, but I'm just saying it's significant. I'm assuming the Filipinos are all coming over here to improve their lifestyles, surely.
Yes, they are. And the Philippines is interesting. One of their major government departments manages what they call overseas Filipinos. So sending money back to the Philippines is a huge part of the Filipino economy. And they have a tradition of going and working in other countries. So in the South Island, for example, about half of our workers, dairy workers, are now Filipino. If you look at the elder care sector, a growing proportion of the elder care workers are Filipino. And so they're very well organised. They're organised by their own government. They keep in touch with the Philippines in various ways, and they send money back. And that's the important part, really, in terms of this huge diaspora of Filipinos around the world. And so we're now part of that diaspora, and you'll see in all, in anywhere you go in New Zealand, there will be Filipinos now, and they're one of the three major.
Yeah, that's spot on. Also, very strong Catholics as well. So Catholic churches have started to boom throughout the country.
The Catholic Church is now the largest Christian church in New Zealand, and largely because of migrants. So I'm not sure whether people realise, but a significant proportion of migrants coming out of India and Sri Lanka are Catholics. But the Filipinos have certainly boosted the Catholic population, and you can see it, in Gore, the new Catholic Church, the new priests who are often Filipinos.
Oamaru is another one.
Booming on the back of this.
Oamaru is another one where
yes.
That's bursting at the seams with Filipino workers, particularly in the dairy industry there, because it's so strong in North Otago.
Yes.
Listen, okay, well, they seem very nice people, though, I have to say, and they fit in really well. You don't see them involved in crime or running liquor stores or things like that as a general rule.
No. And I was going to say, Michael, that we went into a classroom a year or two ago in the South Island, and I think half of the kids in that classroom were Filipinos. So it's not only that they're coming to work here, they're actually contributing to the numbers that keep our educational institutions flourishing in rural and regional New Zealand. They're very good at working in communities with others. They're very generous. So they're good markets to have.
They are. Having said that, we are losing a lot of white and educated Maori folk who are industrious, want to work hard, aspirational, got some qualifications. As you say, the early 30s means that they're taking their kids with them as well.
Yeah.
18-year-olds or graduates from universities or tertiary institutions, maybe apprentices as well. Those people, they're the people that create societies and communities, aren't they? If we're losing them, we're in a bit of trouble. Is that right, Paul?
We are in a bit of trouble, Michael. They do come back, so the net loss is just 46,000. So obviously there's some come back, but they are our youngest and brightest, and there are some rather perverse incentives to go and live overseas and not come back. So very often, you'd build up quite a significant amount of student debt, and then we
Yeah,
wonder why people go and live in another country and not come back.
yeah,
And of course, that debt attracts interest, and people want to avoid that debt on occasions. I mean, I'm rather old-fashioned here. I quite like what we used to do when you or I were young fellas,
yeah,
and
agreed.
bond people. So,
Yeah,
so if you come out of a medical school in New Zealand, if you worked
mm,
as a rural GP for 5 years, why
mm.
don't we discount the debt that you've accumulated as part of that study? So I just think we need to do more to retain, particularly those young professionals, the young entrepreneurs in New Zealand, and I think we could do a much better job in that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be meeting Paul Bluckman, I mean, and you're coming up with the population policy, that's certainly one area that
Yeah,
I'd be working down. The other thing too is that the unpaid student debt, in other words, the debt that is accumulated but isn't being returned or paid back, must be now in the billions of dollars, I would think, and isn't likely to be as well. It sits there sort of on the government books, but gee, I'd be looking at that also thinking clearly the policy isn't working as well because that number's growing.
it is growing. I haven't checked that number recently, but it was certainly north of 2 billion.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
low.
my recollection is 2.3 billion, which
Mm,
seems which seems a lot of money to me.
yeah.
So couldn't we manage that and manage our population and manage our skills much better by doing things like bonding people who've coming out of our professional programs at universities or polytechnics?
Listen, I'll carry on with the demography in just a second, but just on that
Yes,
particular issue, isn't one of the
yes,
problems also that the funding of universities, which was bums on seats,
yes.
encouraged people to go to university when they didn't really need to, accumulate debt for degrees and diplomas that they didn't really need? Wasn't weren't universities sort of complicit in that by their recruitment and by their teaching strategies?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to defend universities, even though I've been spent all my life in them. But I do put a lot of blame on governments here, Michael, in the past who have funded volume
Mm.
rather than quality, or
Yep.
matched what we do in our education and training sector with what the labour market requires. We did repeat surveys of employers, and we asked them what their skill requirements would be in 5 years' time. And we could not get answers from New Zealand employers. They did not know. So we brought it back to 3 years, and even then we struggled. So we've got a problem that our employers aren't sending clear signals. The government's telling us they will fund volume, so large numbers. And then the alternatives, which is things like our apprenticeship schemes, really are not fit for purpose at the moment. So our matching between what we do in terms of education and training in this country and what employers need is actually very poor. And there's fault on both sides, and I think on the government side here. And I wrote a cabinet paper a few years ago on how we would match and prepare people for the contemporary labour market in New Zealand, and it didn't go anywhere. And I don't know why governments are reluctant to align the two much better. Scandinavians, Germany, Netherlands do this much, much better than we do, and we could learn from them, but apparently we don't want to. I don't know what the issue is. You've had a long career in politics. You can suggest some answers, but I just don't know why we don't align our education and training with our labour market and what it needs.
No, neither do I. But I think the autonomy of universities is half the problem too, just quietly. I think we've got
Yes.
too many universities, too many inferior or mediocre undergraduate courses. we do need to do some rationalisation there as well. But I think your issue's right.
Yeah.
Quality is where we need to be going, not quantity. Listen, the other thing I just wanted to talk to you about very quickly was
Yes.
internal migration in this country. Internal
Yeah.
migration, so not talking about
Yes.
people coming into or going out of, but where
No.
people want to live in this country. A lot of people left Auckland between 2018 and 2023.
They did.
Most of them left to go to Waikato in
Mm.
Northland, but they also went to Canterbury, and Canterbury's booming, as you
Yes.
know. But I'm interested if that trend is continuing because Auckland still appears to be growing. Is that as a result of people moving to Auckland, or is that because people are coming from overseas to live in Auckland?
No, there are two factors that are growing Auckland. Auckland still has a young population. So if you look at what's called natural increase, which is birth over death,
Mm,
in most of New Zealand, that's bottoming out. And so you're not getting much growth. So again, when you and I were growing up, the most significant contributor to population growth, whether it was nationally or locally, was kids, having kids. And so we had those baby boom years. So that's less and less a contributor for most of New Zealand, but not in Auckland. The second thing is that Auckland is the destination for between 50 and 60% of our migrants. So even though we've gone from 10,000 net gain migrants a month to now 1,000,
mm,
Auckland is still growing because it's the major destination for the small number of migrants that are coming.
mm,
Through COVID, we saw a net loss out of Auckland of around 12,000 people, and that's largely evaporated. So I know there are people in the region saying, we've seen these Aucklanders flooding in to, Queenstown or Christchurch, wherever you might be, Tauranga. But the latest statistics show that that's no longer a thing. So the net loss is now 3,000 and declining. And when we look around our major cities, they all seem to be losing population to other regions. So Wellingtonians are leaving for the Kapiti Coast of Wairarapa. Christchurch people are leaving for Selwyn and Waimakariri, which is why Selwyn is one of the fastest growing areas in New Zealand. Dunedin's not growing at all. I mean, it's had more deaths and births in the last few years. So it's a very interesting story. The bottom line here is that about half of our population growth is still occurring in Auckland. So on current projections, we would add somewhere around 500,000 people to Auckland's population over the next 2 decades, which would mean that Auckland would be home to about 40% of New Zealanders. And I've just got a major issue with that, Michael. I think that allowing people to go to Auckland to contribute to growth, whether they're migrants or New Zealanders, and then growing the size of Auckland and emptying out into our regions is quite a significant policy and political issue for all of us.
But how are you going to stop that? I mean, people go to the places where they can get jobs and opportunities. Auckland obviously is that place.
Yep, it is.
The provinces are hollowing out, as you say. Let's just try Nelson, for example, which is a beautiful place. It's
Yeah,
had massive population growth, but they've been buffeted by significant economic closures and job losses over the last 12 months.
yeah.
If those people go to Auckland, who could blame them? There's no jobs in the beautiful place of Nelson and the lakes there, but there are in Auckland. Off you go. It's sort of like
Yeah.
economics 101, isn't it really?
It is. It is economics 101. And Nelson is one of those that in the latest statistics is showing population decline. So you're absolutely right. There's a connection there. I think we're not being particularly astute around policy. In Canada, they have what's called the Provincial nominee system, in which the provinces, in our case would be regions, allocate up to half of the points required to migrate to Canada, and then you've got to stay there. So the national government a few years ago said that if you go to somewhere other than Auckland as an immigrant, you get 30 points. But I would have said, well, if they go to, let's say, Gore, then they've got to stay there 5 years to meet their obligations under the visa. So what happens is they get 30 points, they go to Gore, and a year later they're in Auckland. Again, I just don't think we're being very smart. And I think we need to bring in smart entrepreneurial immigrants who grow employment in our regions. And that's what Canada does, and we don't. So I just think, how would we grow jobs and grow regional economies? The other thing I would say, Michael, is that when you go to the smaller communities in New Zealand, and I'm working with one at the moment, they can't get a GP, so they're working off locums. The last retail shop has just closed. Most of the kids coming out of the primary school don't go to the local area school. Why would a family go there if you don't have good educational possibilities and decent medical care as well as jobs? So I think we're in danger of not addressing what you can get in our smaller communities in our regions, and that becomes another incentive for people to leave. So I mean, countries in Europe do this really well. We just don't seem, again, to be particularly enthusiastic about doing anything.
You mentioned Dunedin and Wellington, which are two areas that are particularly, I don't know if depressed is the right word, but they're certainly not burgeoning, either in population growth or economic activity. Is there any hope for them, really? I mean, Dunedin's I was an undergraduate at Otago University. I think I had my first year, Paul, there in 1976. And they were worried about population growth then because it slowed down in comparison to the other three major centres, and it's got worse, it seems, not better. Wellington, its problems have it's always had a problem in terms of it's as a place to live, but now it seems to be deserted. They've lost the average price I was read off their peak from 3-4 years ago for house prices, 20% loss. So some people are even, I suspect, trapped in Wellington at the moment. Is there any hope for either of those two places to recover their mojo?
Well, in Wellington's case, the government has reduced public service by about 9,000 positions. So that will always have a huge impact on Wellington. And
can I just ask you on that one? Presumably, I just want to pick on that one. Yes, but prior to that, they increased the public sector from, I think, 2017 to 2023 by 18,000 jobs. So was there a massive increase in population in Wellington between that time? I didn't...
There was an increase, not a massive one, but there was an increase. And with what we're both talking about now, there's been a reversal of that, both in terms of the growth of the population, but also, of course, things like housing and your investment in housing. So I do think it is depressed. I think it is hard to see, apart from diversifying, hard to see what will turn that around. So, Weta Studios is huge, but you need more than that. In case of Dunedin, there's a huge reliance on the university and on one or two firms. And of course, again, you've got a Nelson issue. Cadbury's closed. There's been a series of, it's called the, in Europe, it's called the doom spiral, and it's a sort of Detroit condition where your key industries disappear and the thing becomes like a ghost town. So I'm not suggesting that will be Dunedin's future, but certainly the question is going to be, how do you generate jobs and how do you keep people there or recruit people into Dunedin? Dunedin used to be one of our largest cities. Might have even been our largest at one point. I don't know. And if you look back on our history, then you'll see places grew, Hokitika or Westport or Greymouth, and now are much, much smaller and much more, firstly, they're aging really fast and they're simply not keeping young people in those areas.
So what you're saying to me is this narrative that we've had over the last 4 or 5 years, that somehow the bigger cities are depopulating and they're heading out to the provinces to, cash in their significant capital gain and starting up isn't true, essentially.
No. with one or two exceptions, Michael. I mean, Queenstown Lakes would be one of those.
Yeah.
So definitely there's a population going there. There are some retirement destinations, which would be Kapiti Coast and Tauranga and Mount Maunganui. But no, I think that the idea that people were pouring out of our major centres, and particularly Auckland, and then repopulating the regions, was a thing. It was a thing prior to COVID. It was a thing immediately after COVID, when remote working became quite a something that people did. But my sense is that that's now ended, and so the number of people, the net loss out of Auckland it's gone down by 70% from 2023. So in 2 years, it's really plummeted. And I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing jobs growth in Auckland. I'm seeing economic activity increasing in Auckland. I'm seeing population growth in Auckland. So it's hard not to see Auckland as a magnet for people and jobs into the future.
And finally, the issue of culture and ethnicity. I'm assuming, now, this is my assumption, and you can tell me that I'm wrong, that the people that are leaving are mostly New Zealand Europeans heading out, and or aspirational,
Māori.
educated Maori. Yep. I'm assuming that, which is sort of, I hope it doesn't carry on, because we'll end up like Tonga, where, what's left is not all that bright, and all the bright Tongans have gone. That's what people in Tonga will tell you.
Yes.
So I don't want to see that continue, but I'm starting to get the feeling, and you talked about the best and the brightest and the youngest, and this sort of age group is sort of 18 to 35. Do we need to start worrying about the fact that we won't have the intellectual, the entrepreneurial, the enterprising base from which our future country will develop?
Yes and no. I definitely think that our youngest and brightest are leaving, and whether they'll stay permanently in Sydney or in London is the question. If economic conditions improve in New Zealand, will we see that flow decline, and will we attract back people? That's been the situation in the past, and I'm desperately hoping that will be the situation in the future. So if you and I talked again in 2 or 3 years' time, and things had improved, then we might see the...
Well, you'll have written your population policy by then and hope that it's been picked up by one of the major parties.
Whether anybody will take any notice and listen, that's another thing.
Good on you, Paul.
Would talk about, pardon?
Oh, no, good on you, mate. I've got to go, but this has been a great
you,
conversation. I wish you well. Have a good meeting today with Mr. Gluckman, and I'll look forward to talking to him again.